let's have a brainstorming session about how to create a good graph theory example. Because in any graph that you're going to explore for the purposes of learning and demonstrating your understanding of graph theory, you want to be able to talk about things like paths and circuits and multiple examples of them, as well as Euler or Hamilton paths and circuits, and then later be able to identify a minimal spanning tree within your graph and apply algorithms to determine such minimal spanning trees. So while we could, for example, pull up a map and say we're going to go around the country from Seattle to Los Angeles, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, as you see here, that really doesn't allow me to explore some of those finer details of graph theory and demonstrate some nuance in my understanding of the various topics within graph theory. So when building my original graph, I want to think about adding other edges into the graph. For example, establishing some alternative routes in my map here. And based on your context, you can decide how many edges you want to build within your original graph. I've added a few more edges and I've taken away that unnecessary context, that map in the background. I've also translated each of my cities to letters and noted those in the table. Added the letters to each vertex on the graph, and you can see some of the additional routes that have been added there in what we're calling the original graph, for which I'm going to later discuss paths and circuits, Euler paths and or circuits, for example, and then I will explore, say, minimal spanning trees and how to find them later on. Now, just thinking through some of those other components that you want to note and be aware of as you're building your original graph. Notice I've explained some of the context in that first paragraph and identified the number of vertices and what they represent. Then in that second paragraph, I've noted what each of the edges represent, a route between any two cities, and how many there are. Thinking beyond this initial setup, it would be a good idea to figure out what weight and what that weight would mean for each of your edges so that you can later think about things like the minimal spanning tree and applying something such as Pruskel's algorithm to determine a minimal spanning tree. So notice how we have added here that each edge is weighted with the number of hours in flight time between any two cities. So this is a well-developed example for the purposes of exploring graph theory. Have fun creating your example and exploring those topics.